April 7, 1942. Melbourne, Australia. The soft hum of radio broadcasts fills the room, blending with the smell of damp leather and polished wood. The air is thick with the tension of impending doom. From the windows of the Prime Minister's office in Melbourne, the city's skyline looks peaceful, a stark contrast to the looming shadow of war stretching across the Pacific. The radio crackles, and the voice of the news announcer cuts through the stillness. Breaking news: Japanese forces have successfully captured the Philippines, and Malaya has fallen. A heavy silence blankets the room. Outside, the distant rumble of air raids echoes across the city's war preparedness drills. Inside, a weary Prime Minister John Cuttin stands by his desk, staring intently at the flickering light of the radio. His mind races, a tangled mess of strategy and national pride. Australia, isolated and vulnerable, now faces the oncoming tide of a powerful enemy, its soldiers exhausted and scattered across the Pacific. But despite the growing fear, there is one thought that dominates his mind. Australia stands alone. In the dimly lit war rooms, Cuttin's cabinet ministers argue with rising voices, their faces drawn tight with anxiety. "We cannot face this threat without help," says a senior military advisor, his voice steady but heavy with concern. "The Americans are our allies. It's time we call them." The room goes quiet, all eyes turning to Cuttin. He takes a deep breath, steadying his resolve. The air is thick with tension, as a new directive is handed to Cuttin, an official letter from the US government offering full military support to Australia. Despite the looming disaster, Cuttin makes the decision that will change history. Australia will not accept the US intervention. His refusal, grounded in the desire to protect Australia's sovereignty, sends shockwaves through the room. He will not let his nation become a satellite to another power. The decision has been made. Prime Minister John Cuttin stands at the front of his war cabinet, his hands gripping the edges of the map on the table before him. The red ink marking Japan's advances across the Pacific seems to mock him. He knows that every corner of the globe is closing in on Australia, and yet, he refuses to bend. The voices in the room, once filled with cautious optimism, now fall silent. "You've made a grave mistake, Cuttin," one of the cabinet members says, his voice trembling slightly. "We need America's might. You can't fight off the Japanese alone." Cuttin, with his usual calm demeanor, doesn't flinch. He lifts his head, meeting the eyes of each man in the room. "I will not allow Australia to become another colony under foreign control, even if that foreign power is our ally. We stand on our own. We always have." The tension is palpable, but Cuttin's mind is already racing ahead, calculating the risks of his decision. The Japanese war machine is a juggernaut, relentless and efficient. But this is not just about survival. It is about national pride, a sense of self-determination that cuts through the air like a sharp blade. Cuttin understands the weight of his decision, but his resolve is unwavering. The cabinet members shift uncomfortably, but Cuttin's leadership remains absolute. They know this decision will define the nation's future. As Cuttin prepares to make his speech to the Australian public, the weight of his leadership becomes clear. The fear of invasion grips the nation, but Cuttin knows that the decision to stand alone will either lead Australia to victory or doom it to failure. The next steps are crucial, and they will need to rely on their own resources. No American forces will come to their rescue. That evening, Cuttin addresses the nation, declaring Australia's intent to fight the war without relying on outside intervention. His words resonate through every home, in every town, as the nation braces for what lies ahead. The radio static buzzes with the same alarming news: more victories for Japan. The fall of the Philippines, the fall of Singapore, each one a blow to Allied forces. But in Australia, the choice has been made. Cuttin's stance is clear, and his defiance of US intervention has begun to shape the nation's strategy. Inside the war rooms, a quiet but potent tension builds. General Douglas MacArthur, the newly appointed US commander in the Pacific, reaches out to Cuttin. He offers his full commitment. The US will send reinforcements, equipment, and the bulk of their Pacific fleet to defend Australia from the growing Japanese threat. It's a generous offer, an answer to the growing cry for help from Australian leaders, but Cuttin does not relent. His response is firm: "We'll handle it ourselves." As the days pass, the mounting pressure on Cuttin only grows. US intelligence provides valuable insights into Japanese plans, and it's clear: an invasion of Australia's northern beaches is imminent. The Australian forces, stretched thin and outgunned, prepare for the worst. Still, Cuttin's decision remains steadfast. His focus is not on asking for help but on building an independent strategy that will allow Australia to defend itself. In Cuttin's mind, the consequences of this decision have already been weighed. The Americans can no longer hold the reins of Australia's defense. It must be done by Australian hands, even if it means facing the full force of the Japanese Empire alone. His resolve never wavers, even as he begins to see the cracks in the unity of his war cabinet. Allies begin to question whether Cuttin's pride is worth the cost of Australian lives. Meanwhile, the Japanese forces are regrouping, focusing their efforts on what they consider the next logical step: the attack on Port Moresby, the gateway to Australia's northern defence. It's a position of critical importance, and every available Australian force is now being rallied to defend it. The next day, a convoy of Australian soldiers, their uniforms stained by the grit of the Pacific, boards a hastily prepared ship for the journey to New Guinea. They are not yet aware of the danger lurking on the horizon, but their fate has already been sealed. The time for hesitation has passed. The humid air presses down on the men as they disembark from the transport ships, the weight of their equipment sinking deep into the mud of the jungle's edge. The soldiers' faces are grim, their minds set on the fight ahead. The Australian soldiers, known for their rugged independence and grit, are preparing to defend a nation that has just rejected external assistance in its darkest hour. Port Moresby stands as the first line of defense between Japan's southern advance and Australia itself. The battle that is about to unfold could change the course of the Pacific War. But despite the urgency, the soldiers' resolve is unmistakable. They are alone. Australia's military doctrine, focused on stealth, guerrilla warfare, and intimate knowledge of the terrain, is put into practice. The jungle, thick and unforgiving, will become both an ally and a battlefield. The men know what they're facing. The Japanese are not just an enemy to be confronted. They are an unstoppable force that has swept across the Pacific with devastating speed. But the Australians, trained in the brutal art of jungle warfare, have something the enemy does not: the advantage of terrain, of knowing the land like the back of their hands. Have no reinforcements, but their determination to defend their land is fierce. Meanwhile, in the command tent, there is little rest. General Blamey, the leader of Australian forces, issues orders and coordinates the defense strategy. He knows the stakes. Port Moresby must hold at all costs. If the Japanese take it, they will have a direct route to Australia's northern coastline. Yet, despite the overwhelming challenge, the resolve within the camp is steely. They may have no reinforcements, but their determination to defend their land is fierce. The Australians, while underprepared in some areas, have one crucial advantage: the desire to fight for their homeland, with a fierce independence and national pride that cannot be easily broken. As they organize into small, highly mobile units, they know that every step could be their last. The jungle is a silent witness to their growing tension, its thick foliage hiding both enemies and opportunities. A whisper spreads through the ranks: the Japanese are not far off. Intelligence reports have confirmed that they are closing in. Australian scouts are dispatched into the underbrush, slipping through the trees like shadows. The tension rises as they prepare for a clash that may very well determine Australia's survival. And as the sun begins to set on the horizon, the soldiers' minds are set, the mission clear: defend Port Moresby, no matter the cost. The Japanese forces advance quickly, their sights firmly set on Port Moresby. Yet, it is in the heart of the jungle, amidst the sprawling undergrowth and the shadowed trees, where Australia's resolve will be tested most. While the world around them braces for an inevitable confrontation, the Australians are quietly redefining the way war is fought. Their doctrine is one of stealth, precision, and knowledge of the terrain. They will not stand and face the enemy head-on like their American counterparts. Instead, they will become a part of the land itself, using the jungle to turn the tide of battle. For the first time, the Australian Special Air Service, SAS, finds itself truly tested. The elite soldiers, trained in the harshest conditions, are dispatched into the heart of enemy territory. These men are not bound by the same rules that govern other armies. They are ghosts in the jungle, tasked with harassing the enemy, severing supply lines, and sowing chaos wherever they can. The battle is not just physical but psychological. The Japanese, accustomed to overwhelming force and swift victories, are thrown into confusion as they encounter Australian troops who seem to appear from nowhere. The sight of 4 men in camouflaged uniforms, silent as shadows, becomes a symbol of fear for the enemy. These ghosts of the jungle, as the Japanese start to call them, make quick work of sabotage and reconnaissance missions. No sound, no sign of their presence, just the sudden chaos of an unseen force wreaking havoc behind enemy lines. The Australian forces, now fully entrenched in their guerrilla tactics, rely heavily on intelligence gathered from local scouts, who blend into the environment with the same seamlessness as the soldiers themselves. The lines between the soldiers and the jungle begin to blur. Every footstep in the brush is measured. Every sound, analyzed. Despite the growing success of these tactics, the cost is high. The men grow weary as they march deeper into the jungle. Supplies are limited, and morale is stretched thin. But the will to survive and protect their land never wavers. As each passing day brings new victories for the Australians, they start to see the true potential of their doctrine. A doctrine that can achieve what sheer firepower cannot. They are not just fighting for survival. They are rewriting the rules of modern warfare, proving that agility, stealth, and knowledge of the land can defeat even the most formidable enemy. The battle for Port Moresby intensifies as the Japanese forces close in. The Australians, though still relying on their unconventional tactics, are increasingly outnumbered. Every day brings a new challenge as the Japanese steadily push forward, their artillery pounding at the edges of Australian positions. Supplies are running low, and the men are exhausted, their bodies worn down from weeks of fighting in the relentless heat of the jungle. Yet, the fight continues. Despite their best efforts, it becomes evident that Australia's forces are not enough to repel the full might of the Japanese offensive. The soldiers are stretched thin, and the weight of their decision to reject American intervention begins to take its toll. Cuttin's choice to stand alone in this struggle, once a point of national pride, now feels like a dangerous gamble. The losses are mounting, and the grim reality of their situation sets in. In the command tent, General Blamey stares at the maps, his fingers tracing the paths of the advancing Japanese troops. He knows the odds are stacked against them. But there is no turning back now. The Australian forces must hold their ground. The strategy that had once seemed so bold and independent now feels like a costly gamble, one that may cost thousands of lives. Reports flood in from every front. The Japanese forces have begun their amphibious landings along Australia's northern coast, taking key airfields and port cities. It's not just Port Moresby that is at risk. It is the entire northern defense of Australia. The decision to reject US help has left Australia vulnerable, and now, with no reinforcements in sight, the country must rely on its own forces to hold the line. The Australians fight on, clinging to their sense of autonomy. Each battle becomes a test of their resolve, their tactics, and their ability to survive. They dig into the dense jungle, fortifying their positions, preparing for the inevitable assault. But as the days drag on and the Japanese forces grow ever closer, the question looms larger. Can they hold out long enough? The air grows thick with tension, the sound of artillery fire echoing in the distance. Every man in the trenches knows this could be the last stand. Yet, despite the mounting pressure, Cuttin refuses to reconsider his stance. He will not call for American help now, not when the cost would be the surrender of their independence. And so, the soldiers continue to fight, knowing they are alone. In this moment of despair, it becomes clear that the price of independence might be far higher than they ever imagined. The jungle around Port Moresby has become a battleground where every shadow, every rustling leaf, holds the potential for danger. The Australian forces, worn down and desperate, continue their fight, relying on their guerrilla warfare tactics to keep the Japanese at bay. The dense canopy of trees provides cover, but it also cloaks the soldiers in an atmosphere of unease and constant vigilance. The Australian Special Air Service, SAS, remains the heart of their resistance, masters of stealth and silence. Their tactics, honed in the brutal Australian outback, are now their greatest asset. They strike without warning, ambushing Japanese patrols, sabotaging supply lines, and disrupting enemy communications. For the Japanese, encountering Australian SAS units becomes a nightmare, as the soldiers move with ghostly precision, never leaving a trace of their presence. The strategy is clear: never engage in a direct confrontation unless absolutely necessary. Instead, they are to use the terrain to their advantage, becoming one with the jungle, making the environment their ally. The Australians, with their knowledge of the land, can move swiftly through the thick undergrowth, while the Japanese struggle to adapt to the dense, unfamiliar terrain. One night, a small SAS patrol, consisting of just 4 men, encounters a larger Japanese unit deep in the jungle. The enemy, with their heavy artillery and well-supplied forces, seems like an unstoppable force. Yet, the Australians, using their superior knowledge of the land, set up an ambush. With deadly precision, they take out several soldiers before vanishing back into the jungle. The Japanese are left in disarray, confused and demoralized, unable to locate the attackers. It's a reminder of the SARS's power. Though small in number, their ability to strike and disappear has become one of the most feared aspects of Australian warfare. As the Australian troops continue their guerrilla warfare tactics, word spreads among the Japanese ranks. The Viet Cong issue a directive: avoid Australians at all costs. The once confident invaders now view the Australians as a ghostly force, elusive, deadly, and untouchable. The Australians' reputation grows, and with it, their psychological warfare begins to take hold. Fear begins to seep into the minds of the Japanese soldiers, making them second-guess every movement. And in a war where morale is as important as weaponry, this shift is as powerful as any bomb. But, as the Australian forces grow bolder, the cost of their tactics begins to weigh heavily. They are making their mark, but each operation drains their resources and their men. The jungle has no mercy, and neither does the enemy. And with each success, the stakes grow higher, the line between victory and disaster thinner. The Australian soldiers have become more than just soldiers in the eyes of the Japanese. They've become phantoms, legends whispered about in fear. The jungle, once a thick and foreboding battleground, now feels like an endless, suffocating web where the enemy never knows where the next blow will come from. The Japanese have learned to fear the name Ma Rung, or the Phantom of the Jungle, a name that sends shivers down the spine of anyone who has survived an encounter with the Australian forces. In the quiet of the dense foliage, Sergeant Thompson and his small team of SAS soldiers move like shadows. Their camouflage is perfect, blending seamlessly with the jungle. They do not move quickly, but they move with an eerie precision, using the wind, the rustling leaves, and the shifting shadows to guide their movements. Each step is calculated. No sound betrays their presence. The SAS have become so skilled in their stealth that the jungle itself seems to bend to their will. It's not just about staying hidden. It's about becoming the jungle. Thompson knows the air here, the rhythm of the wind, the way the light filters through the canopy. The soldiers around him know it too. Each one of them has trained for months, honing skills that would make most soldiers tremble. They are the ghosts of the battlefield, and they've come to disrupt, to haunt, to destroy. One night, under the cover of darkness, Thompson's team is tasked with infiltrating a Japanese supply depot deep in enemy territory. They move with the quiet, deadly grace of predators stalking their prey. They know the enemy's patterns, their routines, their weaknesses. As they get closer to the depot, they can hear the low murmur of Japanese voices in the distance. The camp is heavily guarded, but Thompson knows they won't need to face the entire camp to do their job. They strike swiftly. 2 men silently take out the guards at the entrance, while Thompson and the others plant explosives around the perimeter. The entire operation takes less than 5 minutes. But as they slip back into the jungle, leaving behind only silence and confusion, they know the damage is done. The depot will be in chaos by morning, and the Japanese soldiers will be scrambling to understand how their supplies disappeared overnight. The Japanese have learned a brutal lesson. The Australians do not fight by the same rules. Where the Japanese rely on overwhelming force and rigid tactics, The Australians rely on agility, stealth, and misdirection. They are ghosts, vanishing into the jungle with every strike. The psychological effect is devastating. The Japanese no longer know where to look or who to trust. They have entered a battle they never expected, one that is fought not just with bullets, but with fear. As the night stretches on, the patrol makes its way back to the Australian lines, their spirits high. But there's a growing sense of unease that follows them, a feeling that the Japanese are not just hunting them, they are beginning to break. As they return to base, Thompson overhears disturbing news from his superiors. Intelligence suggests that a large-scale Japanese assault is imminent. The time for hit-and-run tactics is running out. They will need to face the full force of the enemy in the coming days. The air is thick with the smell of smoke and damp earth as the Australian forces receive word of a US company that's been trapped behind enemy lines. The Japanese have surrounded them in a remote valley, cutting off all communication and reinforcements. There's no way the Americans will survive unless help arrives, and that help won't come from the US military. Against all protocol, despite the animosity and rejection they've faced from American forces, the Australians make a choice. Thompson, along with his SAS patrol, volunteers for the mission. It's not their fight, not their responsibility, but the decision to let a fellow soldier perish is one that's too painful to bear. The team begins their trek through the thick, hostile jungle. Their movements are slow, deliberate. Each step could be their last, and Thompson knows it. But there is no fear, only resolve. They move with the efficiency and precision of a well-oiled machine, slipping through the undergrowth, avoiding enemy patrols, and making their way toward the US soldiers who are fighting for their lives. Every minute counts. The longer they wait, the closer the Japanese get to wiping out the American company. It's a race against time, and as they get closer, the tension becomes palpable. The terrain, once a source of safety and advantage, now feels like a trap, the thick jungle a potential battlefield. In the distance, Thompson can hear gunfire. He signals to his team to increase their pace, moving faster now. The terrain grows rougher, the sounds of battle closer. Thompson, his eyes sharp, scans the jungle around him, focusing on the subtle changes in the environment. The way the ground shifts beneath his feet, the small movements in the trees, the distant whir of a helicopter overhead. They finally reach the perimeter of the American position, but it's too late. The Japanese have already started their assault. The Americans are surrounded, and a bloody firefight has erupted. Thompson and his team waste no time. They jump into the fray, their presence a sudden and terrifying surprise for the Japanese soldiers. Using their training, they move in silent formations, picking off enemy soldiers one by one. They don't need to engage the entire enemy force, just enough to create an opening for the Americans to break free. As the firefight rages on, Thompson's team grows dangerously close to being discovered. An enemy soldier spots one of the Australian patrol members. Will their cover be blown? With the Japanese closing in, the Australians manage to break the siege and secure a path for the Americans to escape. But when the dust settles and the battle ends, the Americans, still stunned by the unexpected intervention, are reluctant to acknowledge the Australians' role in their rescue. The SAS soldiers return to base with their victory unsung. The Australian forces, despite their remarkable success in the rescue operation, find little recognition for their efforts. The Americans, still reeling from their narrow escape, make no public acknowledgement of the Australian SARS's critical role in saving them. Their pride, bruised by the unexpected intervention, refuses to allow them to admit that it was the Australians, not their own forces, that pulled them from the brink of death. For the Australians, it's another bitter reminder of the decision they made. They did not fight for praise or glory. They fought because it was the right thing to do. But the sting of rejection lingers, especially for Thompson and his men. They had faced the jungle, fought the Japanese, and saved the lives of their allies. And yet, once again, the world would forget their sacrifice. Back in Australia, the nation celebrates the victory, but beneath the celebrations lies an unspoken truth. Cuttin's rejection of US intervention has come with a price. The victory at Port Moresby, the resilience shown by Australian soldiers, has secured Australia's place in the war, but at what cost? The casualties, The sacrifices, the emotional toll of fighting without the promised reinforcements from their allies weigh heavily on the hearts of those who fought. Cutin, standing alone in his office, watches the celebrations from a distance. His heart swells with national pride, yet there's a quiet sadness in his eyes. Australia has shown the world its strength, its ability to defend itself. But what has it cost them? How many lives were lost because they refused to ask for help when it was so desperately needed? The Australian forces continue to fight, the war pressing on, each battle pushing them further into the depths of sacrifice. The victories are hard-won, but they are not without their scars. For the soldiers who fought in the jungles, the cost is personal. The memory of friends lost in battle, the sense of duty that keeps them moving forward, weighs on them every step of the way. As the war continues, the full impact of Cutin's decision begins to take shape. While Australia has emerged victorious, it's a victory earned with the blood and sweat of a nation that chose to fight alone, rejecting foreign intervention at a time when the world was on fire. A letter arrives in Cutin's office from President Roosevelt. It's another offer for assistance, this time with the full might of the US military. The question looms once again. Will Australia continue its path of independence, or will they finally accept help? Cutin reads the letter silently, his fingers gripping the edge of the paper. His mind races as he considers the full implications of accepting US help now, after everything they've been through. The moment of truth has come, but the answer may already be clear to him. The end.